Hi, Eylul. Welcome to Venture with Grace. We're live, by the way.
Yay!
Yay! Okay, to start the show, I would love for the audience to get to know you a little bit more. So you started your career at Morgan Stanley, and you have worked at various top funds like NEA, Softbank, and now you're a partner at Gradient. Why don't we start with what are some core lessons that you've learned early on in your career that you kind of took into your day-to-day at Gradient now?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I think the thing that has defined my journey a lot was sort of perseverance, and I think one of the things that make a lot of the startups I work with successful is ultimately just figuring out a way, right? Maybe I'll take a step back and tell you about sort of who I am and sort of what brought me here, which will be reflective of like why I think about that. So the way we were just practicing how to pronounce my name before we joined. It's like one of my favorite things to do. So my name means September in Turkish, which, by the way, has a similar meaning in Hebrew and Arabic, which it likely traces back to the Akkadian word for harvest, which is the language spoken by Babylonians. Anyways, random topic, but I just find it crazy that even the Tower of Babel couldn't fracture this linguistic heritage we have here. But anyways, I'm Turkish. I grew up in Istanbul, Turkey. And in Turkey, high schools are ranked. And the only way you get into a top school is you take this like 2-hour multiple choice test. It's offered once in your lifetime, and you take an entire year to study for this test. I was lucky enough that I scored in the top 200 in the country, and I was admitted to this really good school, which happened to be American. But I don't know, I just didn't know I was going to end up there, right? But I ended up wanting to do my best. And then, to be honest, the cultural influences at school and my obsession with probably late 1990s and 2000s TV shows based in New York made me want to come out here. So I just packed up my bags and
Gossip Girl.
Yeah, Gossip Girl, Sex and
Same.
the City, Friends, Will and Grace.
Love that.
After college, I got a job at Morgan Stanley, and I don't know, that was one of the more sort of interesting things I could do, it felt like at that point in my time. But the IPO markets exploded just as I was graduating. And in 2.5 years, I ended up working on 29 IPOs and 4 mergers. And they were all VC backed, as you can imagine. And that was a crazy time, right? Like, we're trying to think about one IPO coming out. We're talking about CoreWeave, and we just had so many back then. And anyway, so some of these are really good exits for NEA, and I used some of those insights and relationships to land my first investing gig. And then I really enjoyed my first role there at NEA, but I got to work with some really smart folks, and I consider some of them still part of my extended family. But I was, by the way, hired on the healthcare side, and frankly, I wanted to switch into becoming more of a generalist. And at the time, one of my closest friends from Morgan Stanley joined the Vision Fund in late 2017. Actually, also one of my closest friends from Columbia as well. They tricked me to moving over, and the rest is history. Softbank was obviously a crazy experience, but I'm super grateful for it, as you can imagine. I got to be involved with some category-defining companies like Flexport. I was a board observer for that for a long time. Watching Ryan navigate the supply chain crisis was insane. It taught me a lot about what it takes to be a generational founder. I also have so much respect and admiration for a lot of the people that were on the board, or Trey Stevens, Raul Mehta, or Dave Clark, that obviously played a meaningful role in that company at some point. I got to meet Enrique from Brex in 2019. I became an LPAC supporting. They had some nuanced credit strategies internally that we can talk about later on. I got to closely work with our team in Israel. My immediate team included Yossi Cohen, which was the former head of Mossad. Going out to dinner with him in Tel Aviv is a crazy experience. Like, I have no idea what the CIA leader looks like right now, but if you go out to dinner with Yossi, people take selfies. Like, people recognize who this guy is. So that was a fascinating experience. And then ultimately, I think working with Masa it's one of the most interesting people I've ever met in my life. His just curiosity for life, his, I don't know, work discipline.
I have so many questions. Wait, so how does he operate at SoftBank?
Oh my gosh, that guy does not sleep a ton. He would be taking meetings at 11 p.m. his time.
Mhm,
He'd be waking up at very odd early hours as well. Like he's extremely hardworking. He is so
mhm,
curious, so interested. For someone who has as much resource as he has, he's so hungry for more. And the thing that he's hungry for is knowledge, I'd say,
mhm,
above and beyond, and to some extent, I think impact.
mhm,
Um, he's obsessed with Napoleon. Not a lot of people know about this, but small people with a lot of sort of power. Maybe
mhm.
that's the connection there. I got to see his house in one of his houses in Tokyo, which was crazy. It's like 7 stories. It's like a football field in a very, very dense city.
I'm
Uh,
sure.
yeah. So when you source the deal before COVID, we used to fly out to take the founder to meet him in Tokyo
Mhm,
for like a 30-minute meeting. And I joined as an associate, but if you get to source something, you get to fly and introduce him to Masa yourself.
mhm.
And if he likes the founder enough, then sometimes you get invited for dinner at his house. So I ended up getting to go twice. And one of them, he showed me and the founder this special room or sort of the corridor he has in his house that's fully dedicated to Napoleon and Josephine. He bought all these paintings and things that they have either featured in or they've used before. And I think it just reflects a lot of how he thinks about the world. He's trying to have as much impact as possible, leave as much of a mark as possible. Sometimes it goes awry, but I think he was a very, very crazy person to spend time with for sure. I've learned a ton from him.
Wow, love that. That's crazy. Yeah, I wonder what that deal was. But anyway, maybe that's a secret. Want to say hi to the audience. Hi, Sensoya. Hello from Jamaica. Hi, hello from San Francisco.
You
Okay.
got someone from Jamaica?
Yeah, someone from Jamaica.
Wow.
Yeah. So not like most people are shy, but like whenever people come in, I always shout out. So yeah.
Aw.
Um, okay, so why don't we talk about like, you mentioned about Masa, you mentioned about like all these like amazing people that you have worked with. Who is on your personal board of advisors when it comes to career decisions?
Oh, I I got asked this question recently, and it was actually it was like a Women's Day event too, and so it was an easy choice. But this is an actual answer. I think my mom is probably one of the
Mhm,
biggest influences in my life. Still, she was a complete badass. She helped start Noah Nordisk in Turkey. She was the first sort of female CEO of a international pharma company in Turkey for years, and I don't know. She's just like a very incredible woman. Speaks 5 languages, but also and traveled the world extensively. But it was also an amazing mother. Always had dedicated Saturdays for me where we would spend one-on-one times, and Sundays was always the three of us as a family. I'm an only
mhm,
child. I think she was prolific with the way she managed her time, attention, energy, and resources. Like I'm
mhm.
always a huge admirer of her. But obviously, over time, as I've sort of grown out, I had to find other sort of women to be obsessed with, and uh, I think we were talking about how like Magdalena Yeşil is she's one of my favorite people right now, one of my favorite mentors. Um, Also happens to be a Turkish woman who came out here, I think late 70s, early 80s, she kind of started her own version of PayPal. She was the first check into Salesforce and was on the board for a long time. She was one of the earliest female GPs in a large venture fund. She was at USVP for many years. I think she's insane. And she has, as someone who's the same age as my mom, has incredible cardio skills. We go hiking on a regular basis. She is meaningfully older than all of us. She will, like outrun everyone. It's just insane. I love her so much.
Totally. Okay, so I have a question about the mom thing. So like, does your mom like train you guys in a certain way, or do you feel like it's more of like aspirational because like she is like a good example of like hardworking and then also does a lot of these like really cool things.
I think it's both. One is showing up as an example, but two, also setting expectations for what constitutes success. I think obviously people can only teach others what they know. So sometimes from a, helping me with my homework perspective, I've outpaced her knowledge, right, pretty early on, right? But it's the framework of having the right sense of discipline, motivation, desire to build and sort of seed a network of interesting people around you. Not just this necessarily for career success, but to like have a successful, happy life. I think those are things that my mom takes very seriously. But also, again, it's very important to highlight. I think her biggest part of her framework was, run hard at everything, including your personal life as well as your professional life, and make sure you have time for both, but also make sure you have time for sleep. It's a lot of trying your best, but doing it in the most efficient way as possible is the framework I think she's instilled in me.
Totally. Okay, I love that. I feel like trying your best is a really good mantra to have. How do you think about, like, I guess, what do you think about as like one skill that you're constantly trying to improve?
Actually, on that note, now that we're going off the rails, I think one of the other things that really affected me growing up was I went to Disney when I was 8, and it was the first time I was in the US. Well, first of all, I go to Epcot and it's like, oh, you can do anything you want. Like from a cultural perspective, I obviously grew up in a very progressive secular community, but I think Asian or Middle Eastern cultures have different views on, like we love to joke about how like every Indian mom wants their kids to be either like a doctor or engineer or whatever. We have a similar dynamic, but people almost have they just have like, it's more survival focused, as opposed to, I think, culture here. It seemed to me, even as a kid, that it's more offense, like on the offense. Like you can do whatever you want. You can, if you really put your mind to it, you can actually and you put a lot of effort into it, you can achieve a lot of what you want in life. I think that, and also seeing that all the Disney princesses were running around in this country, I was like, oh, this seems like an awesome place. I should fully move out here. But I think it was the sentiment of not feeling chained to your, where you're from, your social background, your economic background, even your, knowledge or network as a barrier to entry. That sort of feeling, that the kind of self-confidence that experience instilled in me is, I think, pretty important. It's a part of our family culture too.
I love that. I feel like I like the word that you use, like, people here playing offense instead of defense, because like I feel like as an immigrant, it's always like, hey, have a safe, secure job, instead of
Right.
like, let's go after what you actually want to do. And I feel like, especially living in Silicon Valley, because I feel like people have a high tolerance for failure. So like even if you fail,
Yeah.
like it's kind of like yesterday's stories, like you kind of move forward. Then I feel like a lot of like the I guess like immigrant culture is like, oh, you need to like succeed at all time. So I think that those are like things that kind of like encourage you to try new things, basically.
But also that having to succeed at all times creates a synthetic pressure that makes it more difficult for you to succeed, right? You don't get to try as many times. You tend to act on after extreme deliberation, as opposed to trying many things. And I mean, this is a very awkward, segue into another sort of venture related concept, is especially in early stage venture. I've invested across stages, right? So when you look at growth stage investing, the business already is there, and you're trying to figure out, can I fuel this existing repeatable pattern of growth with extra capital to scale? With early stage, it's a lot of like, can I throw a ton of stuff in the air and see what works? And especially in this environment, when the infrastructure is changing a lot from a, how you build things perspective. Also, it's changing how you sell things, how you market things, how you do posts. Like all those things are changing so dramatically that you need to be trying a lot of things. You need to be on the offense all the time to be a successful startup yourself too. This is a kind of a random connection I made in my mind now, but I think there's cultural things about this country, about Silicon Valley, that make these types of successful stories happen. It's difficult to have that mindset of I'm going to try everything under the sun if you operate in a very different culture, which is, I'd say, what I grew up in.
Totally. Also, hi, Bubble. One of the people commented. Okay, so I love that, and I feel like, speaking of playing offense, why don't we talk about, like, I feel like as a venture investor, you have to do that all the time. So you're a partner at Gradient. I'll let you introduce Gradient to people. So also we had Darian on before, and then Gradient is obviously like a really top fund in AI space. Yeah, I'll let you take over about
Yeah. So we're an AI focused seed fund, pre-seed seed. We've been around at part of the Google ecosystem actually since 2017. We are similar to Google Ventures and CapG, affiliate with Google in the sense that they're the sole LP, but we don't have a strategic mandate. We're completely independent, return-driven funds. We've invested in, I think, more than 250 companies now. And we're a small but mighty team. We have some operators that help our portfolio companies with go-to-market, initial hiring, PR. And then we also have 7 investors. Actually, 6 of us are in San Francisco, and we literally get to sit around a table almost every day, which is, I find, super special. But yeah, we're an eclectic bunch. Some of us have 0 to 1 years of college education, like really entrepreneurial people. Darian's a good example. He's a dropout. Andrew's a Teal Fellow. And some of us have, double E PhDs, come from more technical backgrounds. I like to joke and say I'm right in the middle. I barely graduated from undergrad and had a more traditional finance career. But the thing that I think makes Gradient really interesting is that everyone brings something slightly different to the table. And we are able to, and we want to, back technical founders that have a little bit of a go-to-market edge. I personally just love to work with people they're on Twitter every weekend. They know when a new model's coming off, but at the same time, so they're able to harbor and understand the changes in infrastructure as they happen. But ultimately, they're focused on selling an ultimate product or service to typically the enterprise. So let's say you're selling into the HR call point in an organization. We can start off with like a RAG-based fine-tuning knowledge management tool, but then as the infrastructural changes happen, like you're going to go sell an agentic tool now. Ultimately, the point is you're selling an HR automation service. Like, I don't care if you're an agent. I don't care if you're an LLM workflow. I do care that you're ultimately providing a service to an end user that delights them, and they want to come back for more. They want to maybe buy more things from you. I think that's the best way to play the app layer ecosystem right now, because honestly, it's crazy how easy it's becoming. And I actually said this in a public setting 6 months ago, saying, going from 0 to 1 for a startup has never been easier. And somebody like yelled at me. It was like, you don't know what you're talking about. This is so hard to build these. I absolutely don't want to be undermining anyone's incredible, sweat equity. Like I have so much respect for all the founders. Don't get me wrong. But the point I'm trying to make is, it has become so much easier to code, right? It's so much easier to build things. The components of what makes a company is becoming more and more democratized. So being able to have a really good angle on go-to-market and customer relationship, I think that's making a really big difference. So that's where I spend a lot of my time. But the fund is we're all generalists. We have minors and majors, but I personally tend to spend more of my time on the app layer side and a little bit on security and observability as well, on more traditional infrastructure stack.
Totally. I want to, maybe we could start with like, maybe to give the audience a little bit of background on like how do you kind of like source, diligence and think about deal exit. Maybe we could use one of your portfolio company as an example. So you have backed some of like the most iconic brands like Flexport, Brex, Digits, the like the Digits founder when I was showing before, and the Sarah of Brex as well. So why don't we talk about like use one of these examples on how do you kind of like source to that, to winning the deal, to thinking about exit as well.
I think early stage sourcing is a very interesting muscle that fully honest, I'm still learning how to develop. Growth stages are different because in growth stage, you basically have, let's say, a top 25 to 50 targets you're chasing all the time. And the biggest sort of alpha is, how do I convert them? How do I make sure that they work with me at a valuation that makes sense? So there's a lot of trying to preempt, a lot of trying to add value. On the early stage side, you don't have the luxury of sitting around to wait and see for at the Series A and B stage to look at who's gaining traction, right? So at seed, we have to be taking advantage of our network and make decisions imminently, trying to back someone. To be honest, so much of what we do is backing people at the early stage, because a lot of the really good companies end up pivoting. So for example, actually one of my probably favorite pre-seed investments right now, it's a company called Fall AI. It's actually one that I've done personally. I mean, the team is prolific. They're smart people, but they're just very hungry, and they have very, very high product velocity. I think that's what's making them successful, but they also happen to be building a business that's relevant from a macro perspective. They're focused on, it's an inference platform for media and image models. A lot of gaming and non-gaming apps right now are building on top of these infrastructure platforms, as opposed to setting up long-term partnerships with GCP or worrying about auto-scaling on their own when they accidentally go viral, right? So there's an interesting opportunity, but the fact that they've become dominant there was not obvious. When we did the pre-seed, they were doing something completely different. They were trying to do a MLOps pipeline focused on DBT, and then they just tried, threw a bunch of stuff in the air, didn't necessarily work out. And right when the Gen AI sort of wave was starting, and when the GPU supply chain was broken, they thought, oh, this is an interesting opportunity. Maybe we should jump on that. And they finished, so they started the year 2024 with $1.5 million run rate, finished the year at 30 million run rate. And they're now, I don't know if I'm supposed to be saying this, but they're like past 50 million run rate right now as of end of March. Like, they are crushing it. And I don't know, that's an example of like, it's a team that just really wanted to win. They have the technical background, they have the community building sort of desire aspect, motivation. But they honestly didn't know what they were doing at the beginning. They ended up sort of finding their way, and then once they did, it just kind of spiraled out. But yeah, early stage is a little bit surreptitious that way. I think actually another we'll talk about that later, but the second part is obviously like, once you've came across, so the first part is, how do I source, how do I know where the good companies are? And then number two is, ultimately, we're selling money, which is a commodity thing. How do you like, why would you, what's your right to win in a competitive environment? And I'll be fully honest with you, like, I chase some of these AI infrastructure plays that are like way too hot, have like anything that has like 5 to 15K get up stars. Multi-stage funds will pile on. Like, there was a company I recently looked at that had 300K run rate. They got 8 term sheets priced at like a ridiculous valuation that we just couldn't compete in. So I'm not trying to win those. People can win them every day. We're stingy. We're not going to do that. But then there are other ones where you want to find some angle that help you win on a head-to-head basis. And I think a lot of that is relying on, there isn't like a repeatable strategy, especially for a smaller fund. Like, funny enough, one of my current portfolio companies, Arva Rim, he's awesome. He's this guy was he used to be at Revolut running the FinCrime team, and now he has a KYB platform helping banks and fintechs sort of accelerate the onboarding process. Like, he's prolific, and has a great network, but he's also helping me source stuff. I think that's been one of the benefits. Experiences. There was a company that I was trying to get in contact with, and he wouldn't respond, and Rim happened to be at the same conference with him. So he ended up, hunting him down and said, "Can you respond to my investor, please? She wants to meet with you. I had a good experience with her." And then they sent a selfie to me. Another one, the other company I just mentioned that we ultimately ended up missing because it was way too competitive, was the founder also. I got an intro through one of First Work, the CTO First Work, again, one of my favorite portfolio companies. Shobham used to be director of engineering at Deal and Rippling, and is very well connected in the in the tech communities. He used to run larger organizations, right? He had at some point, I think 90 people reporting to him. So he's well connected. He ended up getting an intro to the founder and said, please talk to my investor. I think those are the best ways to source. Like if you have existing relationships and positive portfolio relationships that help you win deals, I think that's the best. But then there's other ways. So when I was at SoftBank, the way we got to get Brex on the table was I discovered that Enrique, the CEO's roommate from college, happens to be Turkish. I worked that angle. I befriended the chief of staff at the time and started to spend a bunch of time with her, tried to explain to her how many different ways that we can add value. Introductions to portfolio companies. You try every single you throw stuff in the air and then see what sticks. For another deal, we ended up doing with GC when I was at SoftBank. I ended up setting up a JV in Japan to be able to get a good valuation. So you just have to be very creative and just run at it. Just try your best. Try 15 things and see what sticks.
Love that. I have a question on maybe we start with the fall situations. I guess you mentioned about there's a lot of competitors in the space. How do you figure out this is the company that you want to invest in? Maybe we could give the audience a little bit of context on the generative media model space, and then we talk about we start with what it is, then we talk about in the entire space there's a lot of inference optimization companies, but why this one is the winner.
Yeah. I think I'm out there, as you know. So to be honest with you, again, when I made the initial investment, that's not what they were working on. I think today the answer is a little bit different. I think what differentiates that team specifically is just trying to be one step ahead of the game at every possible occasion they have. So basically, I actually know a lot. So I spend a bunch of time with early stage companies that are building on top of their infrastructure. So they've already either had heard of the brand, or sometimes a team would have reached out and already offered to do work with some of the most promising startups that they see. So they encourage them to go and build on top of their infrastructure. And by the way, when those companies take off, guess what? The infrastructure player gets paid. I think they have a very thoughtful developer community outreach strategy. That's number one. I think the number two is they are being trying to become basically almost like a where people go to figure out what are the new models coming out, as opposed to, hey, here's this model I would like to use to incorporate into my product. Is that actually where can I find it? Is it really hosted? It literally, people go to fall and say, oh, what is the best thing what is the most cutting edge things I can build on? Because the moment a publication hits the press, or before a model is going to be launched, they are on top of it already, working on optimizing and finding a way to make it accessible for people. So I think it's the speed, the velocity, and the determination to have a very good solution for the best companies that people grow with is the thing that makes them successful at this moment. Honestly, beyond that, you would have to ask people that are way more in the weeds to be able to make the argument that their performance optimization is better or not. I won't opine on that. I'm as a bystander, just bewildered by the brand that they've been able to build and the quality of companies that they're attracting to work with them.
Totally. I want to dive a little bit deeper into, sorry, I wrote down another two questions. Sorry. This is so organized. Okay. So you mentioned another thing. It's I guess how do you filter some of the deals? So I guess do you do like, are you one of the people who do like a lot of like market mapping? So you mentioned about like, your portfolio company will intro you to these like other founders, but it sounds like you already have these founders in mind to like hunt them down instead of like just like, hearing about, oh, okay, so my roommate from college started a new company, want to invest. So like you're like actually intentionally trying to hunt down XYZ person. So I guess like how do you do the market mapping in your head or like in like at work to like actually map the company that you actually want to talk to? And then I think we touch upon a little bit of like the YC company selection as well. So we don't have to use specific examples, but I guess like every year there's like a billion YC companies. Like how do you think about quickly filter out the one that actually matters? It doesn't have to be YC because right now, recently, I think we're in a demo day crunch. Like literally every day, there's a demo day happening.
I know. So going back to what I said earlier, multi-stage funds have the luxury of sitting back. Let's say there's 10, HVAC voice AI companies coming out. For some reason, that became a very popular category.
Mm-hmm.
The product itself is not very different.
Mm-hmm.
It is also the time to building something that could be POC ready is crazy short right now,
Mm-hmm.
which means that product itself in its earliest iteration is not enough of a barrier to entry. And so, to be honest with you, the answer is it's hard. We're trying to figure it out. It's easier if I can say, all right, I'm going to wait to see which one has more traction and I'm just going to do the A or the B. Yeah, that's easier because the chasm of going from 0 to 1, by the way, from a revenue run rate perspective is depending on what the product is, it is actually becoming easier, especially with higher ACVs and a lot of larger organizations having a desire to try out things.
Mm-hmm.
Net revenue retention, though, is very, very uncertain in the AI app ecosystem right now because a lot of people are interested in trying things and then not necessarily renewing contracts. So going from, I don't know, 2 to 10 or 30, that is like a very head-scratching question mark point.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, the multi-stage funds have more luxury over figuring out what's going to happen from then on. I think you have a lot more, the risk adjusted outcome at that point is way more defined.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. We're trying to figure out, I think to your point, I think we back founders, right? We back people that we think are going to find their way. It doesn't mean that they had the best idea, the best strategy from the onset. But I personally like to work with people that have a perspective. So what I like to work with is somebody that has a 6 to 12 month plan, fully recognizing that plan may not work out and you would have to pivot on, 2, 3, 4 month week, stretches. You have to reevaluate whether the path you're headed is the right way to go. But having a perspective and having either through their career or in some shape or form demonstrate the ability to execute towards those goals are pretty important. And the goals are typically for the early stage founders. Can I build something? Do I have the technical skills? Can I hire people? Can I attract really compelling people that have options to work with other people or even to do their own thing? Can I compel them enough to come work for me to help my dream be a reality? Can I retain those people? Can I attract customers that could work with 10 other companies that offer the same thing to work with me, with my team, and pay the price that I would like for them to pay? Having that type of determination, charisma, competence, I think those are the things that we look for. And I think this is a very, this is a hot take, and a lot of people on my team fully disagree with the statement. I think I couldn't care less about the TAM of a pre-seed or a seed company's product. It does not matter at all. They're going to, if it's a pre-seed especially, like I don't know if it's going to work out. We're going to pivot probably. We're going to navigate through this process. It's more the velocity of how quickly can I push out product? How quickly can I attract a customer? How quickly can I get to an answer? And if I like it, I'm going to repeat it. If I don't like it, I'm going to iterate it. Having that, by the way, I'll give you your flowers in this little moment. I feel like you're doing, Grace, you're doing a great job with like, you're on air, you're doing like, you're developing your network in accelerating speed. I think you're extremely hardworking, and like, this is the kind of energy that I'm interested in, by the way. So that's why I need to talk to you.
I'll call you when I start a company.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, you have your own company and brand, your equity value you're building.
Thank you.
You have the sense of like urgency, right? You have a sense of urgency. You want to get stuff done. I think that's the kind of energy that we look for in people. And then, you know, having a discussion about like, what is the TAM of this product that barely exists, that has 2 customers? Like, sorry.
No worries. It's okay. This is an adult show, so it's not kids only, so it's fine.
No, but honestly, like, did Airbnb have a massive market when it started? Did Uber have a massive market when it started? Like, I guess the TAM could be like housing, yes, but it's different, right? You're basically introducing a new behavior that didn't exist. It's actually so much more difficult to try to gain market share if there's a lot of existing, like if the TAM is big, it means that there's a bunch of players that are embedded and you have to carve them out. And by the way, they happen to have more profit, more resources, ability to build more things that you have to push against it. Like, that's actually harder than trying to, in some circumstances, not always, to try to do something small really, really well, like way better than everyone else, leverage those relationships, leverage the brand you're building, and then upsell other stuff. That, you know, that's a strategy I think in general enterprise SaaS has worked out better than having like the largest, biggest, grandest idea from the onset and then aimlessly heading towards it. Oh, what's going on?
Sorry. Yeah, I think, speaking of, I feel like you mentioned about like building a company. I want to highlight one of your articles.
What do you want to tell me?
This article. But anyway, okay. So because I think I totally agree with you on like the TAM situation. Sorry, I like accidentally launched this too early. I'll add on stage later. But okay, so I want to know more about, I feel like I totally agree with you on like there's no TAM, or like no, you know, there's no TAM at the very beginning. You were like building something with 2 people, and then you pivot every other day, and then, you know, you never really know what's going to land with the customer actually. So I completely agree with you on that. And then I feel like iteration and the speed of iteration is like super important. And I gave credit for you too. I feel like, you know, though I feel like when you you mentioned you guys are like, you know, scrappy, as well as like, you know, you're a small fund, but like on the outside, you know, you're like one of the top AI funds, and obviously you're doing great. And then you have like all these like amazing brand and logos on your resume. So I totally feel like, you know, you also share the value of like, you know, hustling and like actually getting stuff done.
This is, you know, it's funny. I'm gonna interrupt, but I actually have my partner has a friend who's like looking to get into venture, and he keeps telling me that when I might have to like work long hours or something, he was like, "Oh, get your minions to do it." I was like, "What does this guy think I know?" Like, I'm carried around with like tons of like minions with like palm trees. Like, no, it's not that life. No, I work like intense hours, and then and people more senior than me at my firm work even more. And it's hard to scale yourself too. I think I'm trying to learn how to do that, how to be very, very mindful of my time, and how to get the most return for all the meeting slots I have in my calendar. But it's pretty draining for someone who's, I thought I was a pretty social. I'm pretty extroverted, but I get drained, you know? I love my job, to be honest with you. Like, this is the dream job. I just love it. I wake up in the morning and I'm like, how lucky am I to get to hang out with a lot of smart people and just talk to them about, you know, what excites them, you know? It's an awesome job. Imagine being an oncologist, not to say anything bad, but you know, I get to have a very positive, exciting, enthusiastic life. I'm super grateful for that. I'm grateful for the platform and for my career, but like, yeah, I don't have a lot of, I do my own thing. I write my own memos, do my own diligence, run my own show.
Love that. Love a partner who does their own menial work. Okay, so let's do this one first because I feel like this is a great article on like what to win, how do you win enterprise AI. So I will let you start it. You know how? Yeah.
Yeah, so
Honestly, let's start with this thing.
yeah,
Let's
one
go
of the cool
for it.
things about being at we're a relatively higher volume seed fund focused on AI. So we end up seeing, I don't know, I probably talk to 15 companies a week, and we have 7 people in the team. So we get to see a ton. We don't necessarily invest in every company.
Mhm.
We are quite selective in a conversion rate, but we do see a lot. And I think the pattern recognition is a very important part of venture, both on as you think about when to invest, but also how to be helpful to portfolio companies. Sometimes we talk about how having an operating background is very helpful to be an advisor to businesses that are starting off from scratch. But going back to the same theme I've repeated over and over again, because the best practices are evolving so rapidly today, being in the market is the best way to know, having almost a statistical opinion on what is working and what is not. So this is my personal attempt at trying to collect some of my thoughts across 3 articles, 2 of which are still not published. They will come. They're on their way. But it's focused on what I see successful companies in selling application AI to the enterprise are doing in terms of building, selling, and then post-selling. That's different than the SaaS environment we operated in. And I think some of the high-level things that I'm seeing, and these are up for debate, I don't know if anyone's listening to us right now. If people want to comment on it later, feel free to push back on all these things. I love having these interactions back and forth. It's a lovely way to learn. But the one thing that, for example, on the build side and on the sales side that I'm noticing, unlike a traditional sort of third-party SaaS app that you were selling 5-10 years ago, is one, the sales process has become way more technical. So a lot of the customers have these vague use cases of what they would like to automate in their enterprise, but they don't necessarily know how to productize those things. And they also don't know the limitations of the offerings that are being sold to them. So having kind of a sales engineer, a forward deployed, whatever you want to call it, type persona being a part of the process to craft the best use case for the enterprise is, I think, I've seen has been one of the more successful ways of landing contracts and going from a demo to a POC to a full long-term relationship the best. And I'm seeing that, with like OpenAI is doing a lot of this, by the way, but also some of our portfolio companies that I know, especially Writer, we've talked about First Work. And we're still early enough in the cycle to know whether if this translates to long-term retention, but it has the, premise, the basics, beginnings of that, because let's go back into the AI SDR category, for example, in an environment where you can just use a browser to do some search on a lead gen tool that has zero connectivity to your regular workflows, no integrations, no anything. The type of stickiness that product has is so little when there's 25 others that maybe are also offered at a lower price and may have a slightly better algorithm for your particular use case. My relationship to that AI SDR is the duration it takes for me to go and click and X out of that tab. That is exactly when my relationship with that company ends, especially if I have the flexibility to cancel my contract. So I guess in a long-winded way, what I'm trying to say is creating more custom solutions and having a more embedded, forward deployed employee of the startup being a part of that, the success of the implementation could be an interesting way of ingraining, incorporating the organization or the startup into the organization's workflows to create opportunities for further upsell, for making sure that they renew, making sure that they really get the best out of that experience. Actually, I was talking to one of my good friends who is doing customer success at OpenAI, and he was talking to me about how they are being very mindful of the KPIs and metrics people track when they're incorporating ChatGPT Enterprise into their workflows to make sure that they understand also like where the workflow automation is coming from, because that's unless people understand how they are accelerating their work, it is difficult for you to make an argument on ROI. And the thing that is very interesting about, again, back to the comparison to the AI application versus SaaS world, when you're selling a productivity tool, which is what we've been doing for decades and decades, you're making the argument that you are introducing 20% efficiency into the workflow. Like, what does that really mean from a revenue or cost perspective, though? It doesn't mean I'm going to fire someone. It doesn't mean that my revenue is going to go up necessarily. However, when you have an end-to-end tool that fully takes over the job of a human or takes over the job of several software patched together by an outsourced service, you can truly quantify how much money you can save. And so making those economic assessments is so important. And one of my portfolio companies, Cascade, has been doing a good job of running those ROI analyses and showing the actual number of savings that they can achieve, or the time improvement that they can provide. Like, it's not a hypothetical, it is an actual sort of change. And I think that's what's going to be really interesting in this new world. It will also create probably a price spiraling down to the bottom. And so the pricing and how to think about, again, upsell is going to become a very important part of the story. I do think companies that have more of a platform play over time will get to scale and win, because if you're just a point solution and someone else comes in, can offer the same thing at a lower price, but by the way, they bundled it together across a few other things that's, go through the same security reviews, and it's just easier for people to use, the odds that they're going to push you out pretty quickly is there. Anyway, sorry, I diverge, but you should see the inside of my brain. There's a lot of stuff going on.
No, I feel the same way. So like, there's a lot, like, you have a lot of insights on these things, but like, it's all coming to you at once. No, I love that. Like, because I feel the same way. I typically ask like literally 7 questions in a row, and then people are like, can we just end at one? Can we just like talk about one thing at a time? But I wonder, okay, so speaking of Cascade, so you have another article on this thing. So I guess, like, how do you define the HR space in AI?
What that company does is, so they start off with, so what they're doing is creating personalized knowledge management tools for employees across large enterprises. So you can imagine you work at Google or Facebook, or I don't know, Grace, where you worked before, but like, imagine working at like a really large multinational firm, and you just joined and your insurance changed. And you want to ask the question of like, hey, is this doctor that I had before, is that covered by my insurance? Is this drug that I used before covered by my, like, can I move my 401k from X to Z? How does that work? These are small questions that you're not going to find personalized answers to in policy documentation, which, by the way, will take you forever to go through, and you have to be on the call. It's just annoying, right? End up, if you're lucky enough, you maybe ask, an EA or someone else in the team. Typically, you'll ask the HR people for advice. What if you had a system that just personalized a lot of these things based on the corporate policies and resources available to you? So what this company does is they tap into all of your systems of record, like HRIS, benefits, payroll, and then they're able to answer those things for you. They started there, and then ultimately it's pretty easy to spread, though, because the framework's similar as long as you have the sort of the back end enabled by the company. They can now do that for a lot of HR things, learning management. They can do even like reviews. Like, they can do a lot of personalized stuff. Then they said, oh, we can do this for procurement. We can do this for NDAs. We can do this for ITSM. So they're slowly expanding across the enterprise to become basically a level 1 employee assistant. Anything that an employee at a large organization would need to ask about or get on a call for, to have a personalized answer to their question about, as it relates to their employment, about the job, and the the guardrails of what they can do. So I think that's pretty cool and interesting. They're definitely starting with HR, and there's a huge value prop there, but the desire is to become a generalized assistant. And it's different than the Glean value prop, which is
I just about to ask. Yeah, sorry.
yeah. I mean, it is similar to Glean, but the difference is that you are anchoring the experience on the employee, and it's a personalized one. And number two is, one of the funny things we've discovered is that people have found it, like the user experience of engaging with Cascade and all the various different products they offer, creates a sense of intimacy that other enterprise tools don't necessarily have. People have been asking very personalized questions that they're afraid to maybe flag to a coworker, or I don't know, things that they would like to keep private. And so having that conversation be within that ecosystem with a trusted entity, I think changes the way you engage with that AI assistant, as opposed to obviously it's not necessarily that it's hard to build, but it's more that you are gearing the entire focus around employees is, I think, the best way to differentiate them.
Totally. How do you think about, like, in that landscape, there's like so many AI agent that kind of becoming the ChatGPT for corporate. So like a lot of people have different angles, from like the legal angle. There's also like the HR angle. There's like Glean, which is like, I don't know, the angle clearly that's ChatGPT for company. But how do you think about like the differentiation or like the moat for these companies to succeed in a corporate environment?
Honestly, I think that not to underestimate the nuances of each of these use cases, but the architecture from a like AI infrastructure that's needed to be able to support this policy guardrailed knowledge management tool across different parts of the org is actually not that different from each other. So I would argue that having a centralized purchasing relationship, like with you have to pass through security reviews, you have to get through the CFO. Once you have established those relationships, my guess is that folks that have good champions, like you need HR to be a champion, you need procurement to be a champion, but I feel like the CFO and CISO are going to be happier if it's a centralized platform that they have to approve once. Here's an example. Cascade recently closed a large publicly traded medical device company. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the name yet. And that was a very arduous process because they had to come up with what constitutes an AI review, AI security review, because they have never purchased a product of this kind before. So they have to invent what the review is. So imagine across so many different point solutions. But once you're through the door, the odds of it being able to upsell additional products is, I think, meaningfully easier. I've also heard from other companies that are essentially taking over the role of a BPO with AI automation. I've heard the challenges they've had in securing those contracts because of the people. Like, I think companies want to try these things out. They want to learn what it is, but they also were in that transition phase from a technology perspective where people don't really know what they need to be asking for before they feel confident that they can expand these products across the enterprise. Even for very large horizontal players like the large model providers, I think are struggling with large customers that are worried about, allowing a lot of people to access these tools. I can tell you that, a year or two ago, a lot of the large funds wouldn't let you use ChatGPT. They're just fully had closed off access. It's only now that security teams are coming to some sort of, confidence around being able to make those be widely available across the system. So I think the point solutions are going to have a bit of a harder pathway in this use case of making it accessible to, 100,000 employees at the same time.
Mhm.
Like for those things, I think it's going to take a while, and the platforms will probably win.
For sure. I wonder, how do you think about sales? So, like, I know that you are about to launch an article in that regards, like in terms of revenue or sales related, like go-to-market motions for AI companies. Um, I guess like a lot of the AI companies, I would see like the big company maybe like giving them a trial, like purchasing at the beginning, but like it may not, like people may not actually having recurring buying desire for certain products. I guess like maybe if you could give us like a um I guess like a high level overview on like what you wrote about that, and then like, you know, how do you think about what does the sales motion look like for AI company in the future, and then why is that different from the traditional enterprise sales motion, if that's different?
I'm going to steal actually someone else's insight. I was talking to someone who studied Wiz in great detail, after the announcement. And the way historically, as growth investors, I've looked at Wiz, and we ended up doing a small check there too when I was at SoftBank. But the interesting thing about that company was the speed by which, like the time to value they offer,
Mhm.
in compared to any other cybersecurity product is pretty short. That ultimately ended up having a negative effect on, well, various things, but choosing to have a direct sales as opposed to channel early on, choosing things around optimizing for performance ended up impacting the gross margins. Like, and there were a few reasons why they were a relatively unprofitable business at the beginning. Granted, they raised so much money that
Mhm.
they recovered from it, but the reason I think they ended up landing a lot of those large contracts early on was, one, having sort of the right relationships to be able to get in front of them, but two, they would apparently do a lot of work on the customers before actually showing a demo and before getting them through a formal sort of intense initial meeting. And while the product itself is obviously quite compelling and all that, they would apparently cater the demo to the customer in a very specific way, so that when the customer is watching the demo, they're like, wow, this is exactly what I wanted. This is crazy.
Mhm.
And then the conversion would happen really quickly. So the interesting sort of takeaway from that is it's becoming, because it's becoming easier to build things,
Mhm.
it's also becoming easier to customize things. It's also becoming easier to do the demo and gather insights about these customers in a very automated way. So one of my theories that I'm working on, and I'm going to try to actually come back with more real data on, is I think we are able to automate a very, very custom sale process.
Mhm.
As well, taking advantage of how easy it is to set up demos and all that stuff, to
Mhm.
change the way we think about converting rapidly. I think right now the companies that are successful doing like sort of scaling meaningfully, I don't know, I'm thinking about companies like, Sierra, where there's a lot of, I think, while the product ultimately is similar to all the other customer support systems, like maybe there's like 20, 30 I can think of, they seem to have a lot more traction because I think they do a white glove service. They do work with those customers in a very meaningful way.
Mhm.
I do think that that requires a certain amount of fundraising ability to handle, and also, hiring the right people and all that. But I think if we can find a way to automate those things, if we can find a way to make a forward deployed engineer way more scalable because of coding assistance, if we can make a sales engineer, or we can make a less technical person more technical because of the AI assistance we can provide to them during the sale, if we can make the demo be personalized really quickly, if we could use an AI SDR type or data collection to be automated so that you know a lot more about your customer on day one, without having to do their own research yourself, I think we can actually change the way we think about closing sales. And by the way, it's great because the end customer is delighted. I'm acquiring more information and doing more high quality work with less labor. Like, I think it's all going to work out, but we have to see if that truly pans out. Sorry, I've been talking nonstop for an hour, I realized.
No, I was typing nonstop for an hour.
Yeah.
I was like literally taking some notes. Yeah. I think it's really interesting to think about like all these, like, as you mentioned, like, you know, having like, I guess, like, different. I'm like trying to summarize on my brain, but I'm like, oh my god, I took so much notes. So it's like really hard to summarize. But anyway, so I think it's like, you know, you mentioned about like customer support system, and you mentioned about like, you know, I guess the fundraising ability, and then we talk about like the demo side of things, like ASDR, and I think like, so basically, I think you're saying like there's a lot of like customized motion going
Yeah.
on than the, I guess, like, you know, in the past it was a lot like spam vibe
Yeah. Yeah.
things. I don't know if my
Yeah,
summary.
no, I think we're becoming smarter with
Mhm.
automation. Like before we could do spam, now we can
Mhm.
do very thoughtful,
Tailored stuff.
tailored experiences.
Yeah. Okay. Wait. So before we end, like, what is the one sales tool that you recommend that doesn't spam? ASDR. But everything is ASDR.
I
I can name 5 tools in ASDR, but
I won't make any recommendations. I'm not sponsored.
by these
I'm
companies.
not.
You're not a VC influencer?
I'm not a
Oh,
VC
in the SDR
in
space?
this category. I'm happy to recommend you a lot of other solutions, but not that one.
Okay. Okay, so I want to wrap with like a 1 minute fire round. So what's your favorite book?
Oh, I need to come up with a good one. I think Amp It Up, Frank
Oh
Slootman's book.
yeah, yo, that's a
Yeah,
great one. Yeah. Who made the biggest impact in your career?
I think my mom.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Nikola Tesla.
Oh wow. Where can we find you outside of work?
Where can I what?
Where can we find you outside of work?
Oh, I'll be in the kitchen cooking.
What will you be cooking?
Oh, I love cooking Mediterranean food. Cooking is one of the most relaxing things one can ever do. It's the creativity and the repetitiveness. It's a great way to ground yourself and then, you know, have friends and family sitting around a table. I really value that. I love the holidays also.
Love that. Yeah, it's actually on your bio. I was like researching
Oh
that.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
the Mediterranean vibe.
yeah.
Cooking. Okay. Well, Eylul, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was such an interesting conversation about AI, SDR, Brex, and more. Literally looking at my notes, it's like very crazy right now.
Yeah, we went. Oh, well, you told me to go wild, and I decided to go all over the
So
place.
wild. Yeah. Love that.
It's on you.
It's on me. Okay, let me quickly unstream.